I found divorce papers on my kitchen counter with my signature at the bottom, but I had never signed them. My wife, Sophie, had been forging my name while attending legal workshops with her attorney. Little did I know that Sophie's plan to destroy my life and steal my company was about to backfire in the most shocking way possible. But what I discovered about who was really protecting me would change everything. Can you guess who had been watching Sophie's every move? My wife, Sophie, was stealing my company right under my nose, and I had no idea until I found the papers on our kitchen counter. The divorce documents sit there like a bomb waiting to explode. My signature was at the bottom, but my hand had never touched that pen. Every letter looked perfect, like someone had spent hours copying my handwriting. The date showed 3 days ago. The same morning Sophie had made me breakfast and told me she loved me. Something cold crawled up my spine as I read each line. Sophie wanted half of everything we owned, plus full control of my software business. The company I had built from nothing over 10 years would become hers. Workers I had hired, contracts I had signed, customers who trusted me, all of it would belong to my wife. But the worst part was not the money. The worst part was the lie written in black ink across the page. Sophie claimed I had cheated on her with multiple women. She said I had hurt her so badly that she deserved everything I owned. None of it was true, but there was my signature saying it was. My hand shook as I pulled out my phone. Sophie had texted me an hour ago, saying she was at another legal workshop with her lawyer, Mr. Reynolds. For the past month, she had been going to these meetings every Tuesday and Thursday. She always came home late, saying they were learning about property rights and marriage laws. Now I understood what kind of workshop she was really attending. The kitchen felt too small, like the walls were closing in around me. I walked to the window and stared at our backyard where Sophie had planted roses last spring. She had been so happy that day, dirt under her fingernails, smiling as she watered each plant. That woman seemed like a stranger now. I called my office and told my assistant Jenny that I would not be coming in today. Jenny had worked for me since I started the company. She knew every client, every project, every dollar we earned. What would happen to her job if Sophie took over? What would happen to all my workers who depended on me? The papers felt heavy in my hands as I read them again. Sophie's lawyer had written everything very carefully. He used big words that made simple things sound complicated. But the message was clear. Sophie wanted to destroy me financially and take everything I had worked for. My phone rang, and Sophie's picture appeared on the screen. She was calling from her workshop, probably sitting next to Mr. Reynolds right now. "Hi, honey," she said in her sweet voice that used to make me smile. "How was your day?" "Fine," I lied, staring at the forged signature that looked exactly like mine. "How's your workshop going?" "Oh, you know how these legal things are. So boring, but so important for us to understand our rights." The words sounded rehearsed, like she had practiced saying them. "Mr. Reynolds is teaching us about different types of marriage contracts and what happens when couples separate." Separate. The word hit me like a punch to the stomach. "That sounds very educational," I managed to say. "It really is. I'm learning so much about how to protect myself financially. You'll be proud of how smart I'm getting about money matters." Protect herself. From me. Her own husband. "I should let you go," I said, my voice cracking slightly. "I know you need to focus on your workshop. Love you, Ethan. See you tonight." She hung up, and I stood alone in our kitchen, holding proof that the woman I had married 15 years ago was planning to ruin my life. I thought about our wedding day, when Sophie had promised to love me in good times and bad. I remembered when we bought this house together, both of us so excited to start our life as a family. We had talked about having children, growing old together, building something beautiful. Instead, she had been building a plan to take everything from me. The signatures on the papers were perfect copies of my handwriting. Too perfect. Sophie must have practiced for weeks to get them exactly right. I imagined her sitting at this same kitchen table, copying my name over and over while I was at work, planning each letter carefully. But Sophie had made one mistake. She had left the papers where I could find them. I took pictures of every page with my phone, making sure to capture each detail clearly. Then I put the papers back exactly where I had found them. Sophie could not know that I had discovered her plan. Not yet. My laptop was still open on the counter from this morning when I had checked my emails. I logged into our joint bank account and started looking at recent transactions. Sophie had been spending money at coffee shops near Mr. Reynolds' office on the same days as her workshops. She had also made several large cash withdrawals that I did not remember her mentioning. The truth was becoming clearer with each piece of evidence I found. I needed help, and I needed it fast. My business partner Rebecca had recommended her divorce lawyer when she went through her own separation last year. I found his card in my wallet and dialed the number. Marital Law Office. This is James Marital speaking. Mr. Marital, my name is Ethan Truman. I need to see you today about my wife forging my signature on divorce papers. Can you be here in 2 hours? I will be there in 1. James Marital's office smelled like old books and coffee, but the man sitting across from me looked like he had seen every dirty trick in the book. Mr. Truman, in 30 years of practicing law, I have never seen forgery this sophisticated, he said, holding the papers up to the light. Your wife spent considerable time perfecting your signature. Look at these pressure points and the way she curves each letter. This is not amateur work. My stomach dropped as I watched him examine each page with a magnifying glass. The papers that had shocked me this morning now seemed even more sinister under his expert analysis. But forgery is just the beginning of your problems, Marital continued, setting the documents down carefully. These papers do not just ask for a divorce. They contain financial claims that would devastate you completely. He pointed to a section I had not fully understood earlier. Sophie was claiming that I had hidden money from her during our marriage. She said I had secret accounts and investments that she deserved to share. The papers demanded that I pay her $2 million in damages for emotional suffering caused by my alleged affairs. None of this is true, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Truth does not matter if these papers get filed in court, Marital explained. Your wife has created a legal weapon designed to destroy your reputation and your business. She is claiming you committed adultery with employees, which could ruin your professional relationships forever. The room felt like it was spinning around me. Sophie had not just forged my signature. She had constructed an entire false story about who I was as a husband and businessman. There is something else, Marital said, pulling out another document. Your wife has already taken preliminary steps to freeze your business accounts. These papers show she contacted your bank yesterday and informed them that marital assets were in dispute. My blood turned to ice. What does that mean? It means you could lose access to the money you need to run your company. Payroll, rent, supplier payments. Everything could be frozen while the courts sort out her claims. I thought about Jenny and my 12 other employees who depended on me for their paychecks. Sophie's plan would not just hurt me. It would destroy the lives of people who had done nothing wrong. How is this possible? I asked. How could someone freeze my business accounts based on lies? Because the system assumes that spouses are honest with each other, Marital said grimly. When a wife claims her husband is hiding assets, banks and courts take those claims seriously. They freeze accounts first and ask questions later. I pulled out my phone and showed him the bank records I had found. Sophie has been withdrawing cash and meeting with her lawyer for weeks. This was all planned. Marital studied the transactions carefully. Mr. Reynolds has quite a reputation in family court. He specializes in high-asset divorces where the wife claims financial abuse. Some lawyers call him the destroyer because of how aggressively he goes after husbands' businesses. So Sophie did not just stumble into this. She chose a lawyer who specializes in destroying men like me. Exactly. And Reynolds is very good at what he does. He has taken down software executives, real estate developers, and restaurant owners. His strategy is always the same. Forge documents to create urgency, claim adultery to justify large financial settlements, and freeze assets to force quick settlements. The pieces of Sophie's plan were coming together like a terrible puzzle. She had researched lawyers, learned to forge my signature, and created false stories about affairs. Every Tuesday and Thursday workshop had been a strategy session for destroying my life. Can we prove the signatures are forged? I asked. Proving forgery takes time, and time is not on your side. If Reynolds files these papers tomorrow, you could lose access to your business accounts within days. Your company could be bankrupt before we can prove anything. I felt trapped in a nightmare with no way out. Sophie held all the cards, forged papers, a ruthless lawyer, and the element of surprise. But we do have one advantage, Meriton said, a slight smile crossing his face. Your wife does not know that you found the papers. She thinks her plan is still secret. What good does that do us? It means we can investigate her activities without her knowledge. We can gather evidence of her meetings with Reynolds, document her cash withdrawals, and maybe even record conversations that prove this was all planned. Meriton opened a thick folder and pulled out several photographs. Reynolds has used this same strategy with other clients. 2 years ago, he helped a woman named Linda Chun take her husband's construction company. Last year, he assisted Maria Santos in seizing her husband's restaurant chain. Both cases involved forged signatures and false adultery claims. The photographs showed documents nearly identical to mine, the same legal language, the same types of financial claims, even similar handwriting analysis. You mean Sophie is not Reynolds' first victim? She is not even his third. Reynolds has perfected this system over several years. He teaches wives how to forge signatures, helps them create evidence of affairs that never happened, and then files everything simultaneously to overwhelm the husbands. I stare at the photos, feeling sick to my stomach. Sophie had joined a criminal enterprise designed to destroy marriages and steal businesses. The woman I had loved for 15 years was a fraud who had learned her tricks from a professional con artist. What do we do now? I asked. Meriton closed the folder and looked me directly in the eyes. We set a trap, but what Meriton suggested would either save me or destroy me completely. Meriton handed me a tiny recording device that looked like a button, and I knew my marriage was about to become a battlefield. Wear this to dinner tonight, he instructed, showing me how to activate the device. Get Sophie to talk about her workshops with Reynolds. Make her think you are curious about learning more, not suspicious of what she has already done. The weight of the device felt enormous in my palm, even though it was smaller than a coin. Recording my own wife felt like crossing a line I could never uncross, but Sophie had already crossed that line when she forged my signature. I drove home through the evening traffic, practicing conversations in my head. How do you trick someone into confessing that they are destroying your life? How do you pretend to love someone who is systematically stealing everything you have built? Sophie's car was already in our driveway when I arrived. Through the kitchen window, I could see her moving around, probably preparing dinner like she had done thousands of times before. Everything looked normal from the outside, but nothing would ever be normal again. Hey, honey, she called out as I walked through the front door. Perfect timing. Dinner will be ready in 10 minutes. She was making my favorite pasta dish, the same recipe she had learned from her grandmother. The smell filled the house with warmth and memories of happier times. Sophie even wore the blue dress I had bought her for our anniversary last year. Smells amazing, I said, activating the recording device in my shirt pocket. How was your workshop today? Sophie's face lit up with what seemed like genuine excitement. Oh, Ethan, it was so interesting. Mr. Reynolds taught us about something called asset protection. Did you know that wives have legal rights to their husbands' businesses that most people never think about? My stomach clenched, but I forced myself to smile. Really? Tell me more about that. Well, apparently, when a husband builds a business during marriage, the wife has contributed to that success even if she did not work there directly. The emotional support, the home management, the sacrifice of her own career, all of that has value that the law recognizes. She served the pasta while talking, her movements graceful and confident. Sophie had always been beautiful, but tonight she seemed different, more calculating, more dangerous. That makes sense, I said carefully. What kind of value are we talking about? Mr. Reynolds showed us case studies where wives received 50% or more of their husband's companies. Some even got full ownership when the husband had been unfaithful or dishonest about finances. The recording device felt like it was burning a hole in my pocket. Sophie was describing her plan to steal my company while serving me dinner in our own home. Have you learned anything that applies to our situation? I asked, taking a bite of pasta that tasted like cardboard. Sophie paused, her fork halfway to her mouth. For just a moment, something flickered across her face, guilt, maybe, or fear. Then her expression smoothed back into the loving wife mask she had been wearing. Not really, she said with a laugh that sounded forced. We have such a solid marriage. Mr. Reynolds says the workshops are mostly for women who have problems with their husbands. Trust issues, money problems, that sort of thing. The lies flowed from her lips so easily that I wondered how long she had been practicing deception. Had our entire marriage been built on false words and fake smiles? What kind of trust issues? I pressed, refilling her wine glass to keep her talking. Oh, husbands who hide money, who cheat with secretaries or business partners. Mr. Reynolds has seen it all. He told us about this one case where a husband was having affairs with multiple women and lying about his income. The poor wife had no idea until she started investigating. Sophie took a large sip of wine, and I could see her relaxing as she spoke. She was enjoying this conversation, probably thinking she was planting seeds for the divorce she had already filed in secret. How did the wife find out? I asked. Financial records, mostly. Bank statements showing unexplained expenses, credit card charges at hotels and restaurants during work hours. The husband thought he was being careful, but money always leaves a trail. My hands were sweating as I realized Sophie was describing surveillance techniques she had probably used on me. Had she been tracking my spending? Monitoring my credit cards? Looking for evidence of affairs that did not exist? That sounds like something out of a movie, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Mr. Reynolds says it happens more often than people think. Successful men get arrogant and start believing they deserve whatever they want. They think their wives are too stupid or too dependent to fight back. The venom in her voice was unmistakable now. Sophie was not just planning to divorce me. She was planning to punish me for crimes I had never committed. What happened to the wife in that case? She got everything. The business, the house, the cars, even his retirement accounts. Mr. Reynolds made sure she was compensated for all the pain and suffering her husband had caused. Sophie's eyes gleamed as she described another man's destruction. She was enjoying the fantasy of my financial ruin, savoring the thought of taking everything I had worked for. Mr. Reynolds sounds like an impressive lawyer, I said. He is amazing. He really cares about protecting women from dishonest husbands. He has helped so many wives get what they deserve after years of being lied to and cheated on. The recording device captured every word as Sophie painted herself as a victim and me as a villain. She had constructed an entire false narrative where I was the bad guy and she was the innocent wife fighting for justice. My phone buzzed with a text message. Sophie glanced at it and her expression changed instantly. "Who is texting you this late?" she asked, her voice suddenly sharp and suspicious. I looked at the screen and felt my blood freeze. The message was from Rebecca, my business partner, asking about tomorrow's client meeting. But Sophie was staring at the phone like it contained proof of an affair. "Just Rebecca about work stuff," I said casually. Sophie's eyes narrowed, and I could see the wheels turning in her head. She was already planning how to use this innocent text message as evidence against me. But what happened next would turn my trap into her opportunity. Sophie snatched my phone before I could stop her, and the look in her eyes told me everything had just changed. "Rebecca again," she said, scrolling through my messages with the focus of a detective examining evidence. "You two seem to text each other quite a lot for just business partners." My heart pounded as I watched Sophie read months of completely innocent work conversations. Messages about client meetings, project deadlines, and company expenses suddenly looked suspicious under her scrutiny. "Sophie, give me my phone back," I said firmly, but she was already taking screenshots of our conversation history. "Look at this," she said, showing me a text from 3 weeks ago, where Rebecca had written, "Thanks for dinner. You're the best. You took her to dinner and never mentioned it to me." The dinner had been a working meal with our biggest client, but explaining that now would sound like a lie. Sophie was building a case against me using my own phone, and I was powerless to stop her. "We were meeting with the Johnson account," I said. "You know how important that client is to our company." At 9:30 at night, Sophie held up another message showing the timestamp. What kind of business meeting happens that late? I felt trapped in a nightmare where my innocent actions were being twisted into evidence of guilt. The recording device in my pocket was still running, but now Sophie was collecting ammunition to use against me. "I can explain every single message," I said, reaching for the phone. Sophie backed away, clutching the device like it contained gold. "Can you explain this one where she says she loves working with you? Or this one where you tell her she looks nice?" Each message Sophie read aloud sounded worse than the last, even though I remembered the harmless context of every conversation. Rebecca and I had worked together for 5 years without any romantic involvement, but Sophie was making our professional relationship sound like a secret affair. "You have been lying to me for months," Sophie said, her voice rising with manufactured outrage. "All those late nights at the office, all those business trips with Rebecca. How could I have been so blind?" The performance was flawless. Sophie sounded like a heartbroken wife discovering her husband's betrayal, when she was actually the one who had been planning betrayal for weeks. She was using my own phone to justify the divorce papers she had already forged. "Sophie, you know Rebecca and I are just business partners. You have met her dozens of times at company events. Business partners who text each other every day. Business partners who have dinner together without telling their spouses." Sophie was working herself into a fury that seemed completely genuine. "How long has this affair been going on?" I realized with growing horror that Sophie was not just collecting evidence. She was creating it. She was building a story of infidelity that would justify everything in the forged divorce papers. "There is no affair," I said desperately. "Rebecca is married with 2 kids. We work together, nothing more." "Married people have affairs all the time," Sophie shot back, "especially with younger, prettier business partners." Rebecca was actually 3 years older than Sophie and had never shown any romantic interest in me, but truth did not matter anymore. Sophie was constructing a narrative that would hold up in divorce court. My phone rang in Sophie's hand, and Rebecca's name appeared on the screen. Sophie answered before I could protest. "Hello, Rebecca," Sophie said in a voice dripping with false sweetness. "This is Ethan's wife. I was just looking through his phone and noticed you two communicate quite frequently." I could hear Rebecca's confused voice through the speaker. "Oh, Sophia. Yes, Ethan and I work together every day. Is everything okay?" "I'm sure you do work together," Sophie said meaningfully. "Very closely, it seems. Tell me, do you always text married men late at night?" What?" "Sophie, I think there might be some misunderstanding. Ethan and I have a professional relationship." "Professional," Sophie repeated, making the words sound dirty. "Is that what you call it when you thank someone for dinner and tell them they are the best?" I grabbed the phone from Sophie's hand and hung up on Rebecca before more damage could be done. But Sophie was already smiling like she had won a victory. "Interesting reaction," she said calmly. "If there is nothing going on between you two, why did you hang up so quickly?" Every move I made was being interpreted as evidence of guilt. Sophie had turned my attempt to protect Rebecca into proof that we had something to hide. "You are being ridiculous," I said, but even I could hear how defensive I sounded. Am I finally seeing the truth about my husband?" Sophie pulled out her own phone and started typing rapidly. "I think Mr. Reynolds needs to hear about this conversation." I watched in horror as Sophie sent a detailed message to her lawyer, describing my phone contents and my suspicious behavior during the call with Rebecca. She was feeding Reynolds information that would strengthen the case against me. "Sophie, please. You are misunderstanding everything." "No, Ethan. I am understanding everything perfectly." She looked at me with cold calculation. "You have been having an affair with Rebecca, lying to me about your work schedule, and probably hiding money too. Mr. Reynolds warned us that cheating husbands always try to protect their assets before filing for divorce. The trap Meriden and I had set was backfiring spectacularly. Instead of getting Sophie to confess her plans, I had given her new ammunition to use against me. "I'm not hiding any money. You have access to all our accounts." "The accounts you let me see," Sophie corrected. "Mr. Reynolds says unfaithful husbands always have secret accounts their wives never know about." She was quoting her lawyer like he was some kind of prophet, using his words to justify suspicions that had no basis in reality. Sophie had been poisoned against me by a man who made money destroying marriages. My phone buzzed with a text from Rebecca. "Ethan, what just happened? Your wife sounded really upset. Should I be worried about my job?" Sophie read the message over my shoulder and laughed bitterly. "She's worried about her job. How touching. I wonder what other benefits you have been giving your business partner." The recording device in my pocket felt useless now. I had evidence of Sophie discussing her legal strategies, but she had evidence of what looked like an affair. In divorce court, adultery always trumped financial manipulation. Sophie, I love you. I have never cheated on you with anyone. She stared at me for a long moment, and I thought I saw a flicker of the woman I had married. Then her expression hardened again. If you really love me, you will sign the divorce papers without fighting. Make this easy for both of us. Then she said something that made my blood run cold. Sophie walked to our kitchen drawer and pulled out a manila envelope that made my stomach drop to the floor. I already filed the divorce papers this morning, she announced calmly, setting the envelope on our kitchen table like it was a grocery list. Mr. Reynolds submitted everything to the courthouse at 9 a.m. The judge will see your forged signature and my evidence of your affair with Rebecca by tomorrow afternoon. The room spun around me as I realized how completely Sophie had outplayed me. While I was planning traps and recording conversations, she had already launched her attack. The papers I found yesterday were just copies. The real documents were now in the legal system. You cannot file papers with a forged signature, I said weakly, though we both knew she already had. What forged signature? Sophie opened the envelope and showed me official court documents with my name at the bottom. This looks exactly like your handwriting to me. And after tonight's phone call with Rebecca, I have even more proof that you have been lying to me for months. My legs felt like water as I sat down at our kitchen table. Sophie had been steps ahead of me from the beginning. Every move I made played right into her strategy. The court will investigate the signature, I said, grasping for any hope. By the time they investigate anything, your business accounts will be frozen and Rebecca will be fired for having an affair with her married business partner. Sophie sat across from me with the confidence of someone who had already won. Mr. Reynolds says most judges believe wives over cheating husbands, especially when there's clear evidence. She pulled out printed copies of my text messages with Rebecca, highlighted in yellow marker to make innocent conversations look suspicious. Sophie had been preparing this evidence package while pretending to love me. These messages show a pattern of deception, she continued, sounding like she was reading from script. Late-night communications, secret dinners, emotional intimacy that should exist between husband and wife, not business partners. I stared at the highlighted text that had been twisted beyond recognition. A message where I told Rebecca, "Good job on the presentation," was marked as inappropriate praise. A text about working late was labeled as a secret meeting. You know, none of this is true, I said desperately. What I know is that my husband has been lying to me while I was trying to learn about protecting myself legally. Sophie's voice carried the perfect tone of a wounded wife. Mr. Reynolds warned me that guilty husbands always deny everything, even when caught with evidence. She had turned my attempt to catch her in a lie into proof of my own dishonesty. Sophie was not just stealing my money. She was stealing my reputation and my ability to defend myself. How long have you been planning this? I asked. Planning what? Learning about my legal rights as a married woman. Sophie's innocent expression was masterful. Mr. Reynolds says every wife should understand what she's entitled to if her marriage fails. I was just being responsible. The recording device in my pocket had captured hours of her admitting to learning about asset seizure and financial manipulation, but those recordings meant nothing if I was branded as an adulterer first. You practiced my signature for weeks, I said, pulling out my phone to show her the photos I had taken of the original papers. Sophie glanced at the images and laughed. Those are just the papers Mr. Reynolds prepared for our workshop. He wanted us to see what real divorce documents look like so we could protect ourselves if we ever needed them. Every piece of evidence I had gathered was being explained away with reasonable-sounding lies. Sophie had an answer for everything because she had prepared for this confrontation. The women in your workshop learned to forge their husbands' signatures, too. We learned to recognize our legal rights and protect our interests, Sophie corrected smoothly. If that means knowing how to navigate the legal system when husbands become unfaithful, then yes, we learned valuable skills. She was making fraud sound like self-defense and theft sound like justice. Sophie had been trained by a professional to twist every fact in her favor. My phone rang, and Meriton's name appeared on the screen. Sophie watched me answer with the expression of someone who had already won. "Ethan, we have a problem," Meriton said without preamble. Your wife filed divorce papers this morning claiming adultery and financial deception. The court has issued a temporary restraining order freezing your business accounts pending investigation. The words hit me like physical blows. How was that possible so quickly? Her lawyer presented evidence of an ongoing affair and suspicious financial activity. Judges take these claims seriously when children or substantial assets are involved. I looked at Sophie, who was listening to every word with satisfaction. She had destroyed my financial stability in a single morning while I was still trying to figure out her plan. What about the forged signatures? That will take weeks to prove through handwriting analysis. Meanwhile, your company cannot access its operating funds. I hung up and stared at Sophie across her kitchen table. She had checkmate me completely. Mr. Reynolds is very good at protecting his clients, she said with false sympathy. He made sure I would be safe from any retaliation you might attempt. Retaliation for what? You are the one destroying our marriage. I am protecting myself from a husband who has been lying and cheating while hiding assets from his wife. Sophie stood up and smoothed her dress. The court agrees that I need protection from your deceptive behavior. She walked toward the door, leaving me alone with the wreckage of my life scattered across our kitchen table. But Sophie had made one crucial mistake that would destroy everything. The next morning, Sophie was handcuffed in our driveway while FBI agents searched our house, and I finally understood why Meriden had been smiling yesterday. Ethan Truman, the lead agent, approached me as I stood in shocked silence, watching Sophie being read her rights. I am Agent Warwick with the Financial Crimes Division. We need to speak with you about your wife's activities with attorney Gerald Reynolds. Sophie's face was white with terror as she realized her carefully planned scheme was crumbling around her. The confident woman who had destroyed my life 12 hours ago now looked like a frightened criminal caught in the act. "This is a mistake," Sophie shouted from the police car. "I'm a victim here. My husband has been cheating and hiding money from me." Agent Warwick looked at me with something like sympathy. "Mr. Truman, your wife has been participating in an organized fraud operation. Reynolds and his associates have been running this scheme for over 3 years." My legs felt weak as I processed what was happening. Fraud operation? Reynolds recruits married women with wealthy husbands and teaches them to forge signatures and fabricate evidence of adultery. He then files simultaneous divorce cases designed to overwhelm the legal system and force quick settlements. The agent showed me photographs of documents nearly identical to the ones Sophie had forged. Different names, different signatures, but the same legal language and the same false claims of hidden assets and extramarital affairs. Your wife is the 7th woman we have connected to this operation. Reynolds has stolen over $12 million from unsuspecting husbands using this exact method. I thought about the other cases Meriden had mentioned, Linda Chun, Maria Santos, and all the other wives who had learned to destroy their marriages for money. How did you catch them? Your business partner Rebecca contacted us yesterday after your wife's threatening phone call. Rebecca has been working undercover with our financial crimes unit for 6 months. The world tilted sideways as I realized Rebecca had not just been my innocent business partner. She had been an FBI agent investigating the very crime being committed against me. Rebecca is FBI? Special Agent Rebecca Halstead, specialized in matrimonial fraud cases. She has been documenting Reynolds' operation while building evidence against his network of accomplices. Everything made sense now. Rebecca's divorce last year, her recommendation of Meriden as a lawyer, even her presence in my business during the time when Sophie was learning to forge signatures. She was protecting me? She was protecting everyone Reynolds was targeting. Your case gave us the evidence we needed to arrest the entire operation. Agent Warwick handed me a thick folder filled with surveillance photos, financial records, and recorded conversations. Sophie appeared in dozens of images meeting with Reynolds and other women who had participated in the scheme. Your wife made one critical mistake, the agent explained. She deposited the cash advances Reynolds gave her into the same account she shared with you. When we traced the money, it led us directly to their criminal enterprise. I remember the cash withdrawals I had noticed in our bank statements. Sophie had been paid to destroy our marriage, and she had been too greedy to hide the evidence properly. Reynolds advances money to his clients to cover legal fees and living expenses during the divorce process. He recovers his investment plus 50% of whatever assets the women steal from their husbands. The scope of the betrayal was staggering. Sophie had not just forged my signature. She had joined a criminal organization that viewed marriage as a business opportunity. What happens now? Reynolds is facing federal charges for racketeering, fraud, and conspiracy. Your wife and the other participants are being charged as co-conspirators. The frozen assets will be returned to their rightful owners. Through our front window, I could see Sophie sitting in the police car, probably still believing she could talk her way out of trouble. She had no idea that every conversation with Reynolds had been recorded and every financial transaction had been traced. Mr. Truman, there's something else you should know. Agent Warwick looked uncomfortable. Your wife has been planning this for over 8 months. She specifically targeted you because of your software company's value and your trusting nature. The words hit me like a physical blow. Sophie had not just fallen into Reynolds' trap. She had sought him out specifically to destroy me. We found emails between your wife and Reynolds dating back to last October. She researched your business finances and identified you as an ideal target for their operation. I thought about all the nights Sophie had asked innocent questions about my work, all the time she had shown interest in my business dealings. She had been gathering intelligence to help Reynolds plan my destruction. The good news is that your marriage can be annulled based on fraud, and your business accounts will be unfrozen within 48 hours. Reynolds' operation has been completely dismantled. As the FBI agents finished their work, Rebecca appeared at my front door. She looked different now, more serious, more professional, but also relieved that her undercover assignment was finally over. "I'm sorry I could not tell you the truth," she said. "We needed Reynolds to believe his plan was working perfectly until we could gather enough evidence to arrest everyone involved." I watched Sophie being driven away in the police car, probably heading to a federal detention center where she would await trial for conspiracy and fraud. She really believed she was going to destroy me and get away with it, I said, still struggling to process everything that had happened. Reynolds convinced all his clients that their husbands deserved to be punished. He created a system where theft felt like justice and fraud felt like self-defense. 6 months later, Sophie was sentenced to 4 years in federal prison. Reynolds received 12 years for running the criminal enterprise. My business survived, my reputation was cleared, and I learned that sometimes the people trying to destroy you are actually the ones being destroyed. The biggest surprise was not that Sophie had tried to ruin my life. It was discovering that someone had been protecting me all along. Sometimes the hunter does not realize they have become the hunted until it is far too late.